Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to this update on the forecast for today and tomorrow as we continue our multi-day stretch of severe weather here to start November. As many of you know, it was quite the night across Oklahoma last night. Multiple tornadoes, a few of which could be significant in and around the Oklahoma City metro area, as well as down to the south. Closer to the Red River. It was pretty intense there for a while, including one circulation that came within a mile of where I live here in South Norman. We got some 70 plus mile an hour wind gusts in what could have been the outer circulation of a little spin up there within the line. And we are without power. So I'm doing this on my phone hotspot in the dark this morning, but wanted to at least get a video out this morning because we have a little bit more clarity on where things stand for today's setup. Tomorrow, they have also made some changes. We'll talk about those in a second. And it's another situation where tomorrow we will have to kind of see how tonight's convection plays out before we can get a little bit of a better idea on tomorrow. But let's see where we stand right now. This is the current convective outlook for today, Sunday, November 3rd. Slight risk is out for parts of Oklahoma into kind of west central Texas there, including Tulsa, Oklahoma City metro area, Lawton down to Wichita Falls, Abilene, and areas in between under the gun for that level 2 out of 5 slight risk in the yellow shaded region here, with a marginal risk extending all the way over toward kind of the western Louisiana, western Arkansas corridor and up into western Kansas and central and north central Nebraska. All hazards once again on the table for today. Tornado threat is at a 5% right now for that slight risk corridor, north central Oklahoma down into west central Texas, with a 2% surrounding that. Large hail also going to be a threat for today. Perhaps significant hail. Could see some 2+ inch in diameter hailstones, especially from that west central Texas into western Oklahoma corridor. But we do have a broader area there, including the OKC Metroplex, that could see some large hail with today's storms, and damaging wind is on tap for today as well. And then tomorrow, they have upgraded to an enhanced risk level 3 out of 5 in the orange shaded region here. So that includes places like northeast Texas, the eastern third or so of Oklahoma into western Arkansas, far southwest Missouri, including places like Joplin, down toward Fort Smith, Arkansas, and then down into northeast Texas, places like Paris in that level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk, with a large slight risk level 2 out of 5 surrounding that, including the Austin, Waco, Dallas, Springfield, Missouri, and Jefferson City areas, as well as the Oklahoma City metro area. So potent setup on tap for tomorrow. Tornado threat is now upgraded to a 10% hatched for tomorrow, so the potential for significant tornadoes exists, especially within the yellow stippled region there that coincides with the enhanced risk. Large 2 and 5% areas surrounding that. Large hail and damaging wind going to be elevated threats for tomorrow as well. So a couple of days left with this little outbreak sequence we have going on here. Hopefully we don't see what we saw last night across Oklahoma, but some of the conditions are there for perhaps a repeat and some tornadoes, perhaps significant tornadoes over the next couple of days, particularly tomorrow, Monday, November 4th. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on right now. This is our current satellite imagery, and you can see some ongoing storms across Oklahoma into central Texas. That is a lot of what remains from last night's activity, especially across Oklahoma. The severity has certainly come down a little bit, so that is a good thing. But we are seeing some additional development out here to the west already. I'm recording this just before 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time this morning, and we already see some storm development out here across northwest Texas into western Oklahoma. We're going to see continued storm development throughout the day as we have an environment that is already favorable for storm development out here across this region. We'll take a look at some soundings here in just a second. Zooming in on the radar imagery, this is what we have going on right now. Our band from overnight moving off into Arkansas. Large just batch of rain, couple special weather statements in here and there, but overall the severity of this complex has decreased drastically since last night, when we had a lot of QLCS spin-ups and even some embedded supercells within the line. But you see these returns starting to fire up in northwest Texas to central Oklahoma. That is going to continue throughout the morning into the afternoon hours today. We also have some storms down to the south. Let me put on our southern sector here. Saw a little bit of a complex in Texas there. Some stronger storms down there approaching central Texas, moving up in the general direction of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Still, we have, I think, some special weather statements out for these. If we look out here across Texas, yeah, that's just west of the Killeen area right now. Some special weather statements there with that activity moving off toward the northeast as we go into the next few hours. But mostly disorganized convection, maybe just some isolated wind gust, isolated large hailstone here or there. But this activity back to the west is what we're watching closely for a renewed severe threat going into the next several hours. So we'll take a look at our upper air map right now. This is our 500 millibar map on the SPC mesoanalysis page. Very deep digging trough here, as we talked about yesterday. That is going to continue to dig down and impinge upon the southern plains. Broad southwesterly flow out here across the southern plains will continue today, and we should have some embedded impulses rotating through this southwesterly flow. We'll take a look at 700 millibars and see what we have going on there. And you can see a few little ripples within the flow. This is perhaps a convectively enhanced little ripple there that is moving through off into Missouri with a few ripples back in here to the southwest of the area of interest for today. So those are going to continue to move through as we go through the afternoon, providing a little bit of support for renewed convective development today. 850 millibars. We have seen a very strong low-level jet persist this morning. We had a very big ramp up in the low-level jet after dark last night, hence the favorable environment for tornadic storms across Oklahoma last night. But that has persisted into the morning, 40 to 50, 55 knots or so, all the way from the Great Lakes region, southern Canada, down into the Texas area, and that is going to persist through the day. It will wane a little bit as we go through the afternoon hours today, so we should see a decrease in low-level shear through the day, but that is going to pick up once again as we go into the evening hours, nighttime hours tonight. You can see a little bit of a broad cyclone here out across the central high plains that will continue to consolidate a little bit today and even further tomorrow, providing a little bit of extra support for severe storms out across the central and southern plains. At the surface, once again, we've started to see a little bit better surface low development. Yesterday, it was very nebulous, the low-level pattern here, but we have started to see surface cyclone development here to the lee of the Rockies in eastern Colorado, the central high plains region right there. And again, that is going to continue to consolidate today, particularly over eastern to southeastern Colorado, it appears. We'll take a look at some model data here in just a second, but that will help to really continue that strong warm moist advection across this region, providing for multiple rounds of storms within a broad warm sector here. Surface data, raw surface data here, current surface data, and we have a pretty interesting feature that we need to keep note of today, and it is this outflow boundary that is draped right around the Red River region at this point. This is a feature that is going to be critical for today, as this again could focus potential severe thunderstorm activity with all hazards along it as we go into the afternoon. So this is situated right here at this point. That is due to how far south it is pushed due to the ongoing convection. We did see that the convection across this area is waning in intensity and moving off to the east pretty quickly. We do have some storms behind it, but this is really tied to this complex here, our complex from overnight. So that is moving off and waning in intensity pretty quickly. So we should see this outflow boundary stall pretty decently. If it has not already stalled, it's hard to pick up on radar, but if it is not stalled already, it should stall at some point soon. And we should see some northward advance of this boundary going into the afternoon, given we have stronger surface cyclogenesis out here across eastern to southeastern Colorado, helping to strengthen and back those low-level winds and maintain that strong warm advection regime. That should help push this boundary off to the north a little bit. Where it ends up is unclear, but it looks to be probably somewhere in the Red River vicinity, maybe just into southern Oklahoma, and any storms that can latch onto that boundary later on today will have that most enhanced threat for all hazards, including tornadoes. And I don't want to rule out a significant tornado today as well, even though the SPC does not have a significant tornado risk area. They did mention possibly a greater confidence corridor in tornado potential coming soon in future outlooks once we know better the position of this outflow boundary going into the afternoon. From an overall sense, very juicy air mass across the region here. Dew points in the 60s and even some 70s dew points here approaching the Red River near the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So very robust moisture across this corridor for today. You can see where the overnight convection has overturned the atmosphere a little bit. Dew points in the low 60s up here across much of Oklahoma. As this convection moves out this morning and we get replaced at least with some heating before this next round of storms, we should see some recovery across these regions. But it looks like the best air mass is going to be down here, perhaps southern Oklahoma, southward into much of Texas. So storms down in that corridor, coinciding with the outflow boundary, going to have that greatest severe threat tapping into the favorable environment along the outflow boundary and along its southern flanks as well. Sounding from this morning, Norman did not release a sounding for reasons due to last night's storms. I suspect they've been very busy this morning. Power may be out at the office there. I'm not 100% sure. But we have a Dallas-Fort Worth sounding from this morning, and you can see why we're already expecting storm development here within the next few hours and storm intensification within the next few hours, because we already have an environment that is primed and ready for severe storm initiation. Plenty of instability in place here, some steeper lapse rate layers aloft here, perhaps due to an elevated mixed layer making its way in across this region, but plenty of instability, upwards of 1,400 joules per kilogram mixed layer Cape. This is again Dallas-Fort Worth at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time this morning. Fairly deep moisture here, 73 over 71 at the surface, with deep moisture extending up above about 800 millibars or so. So plenty of moisture to work with beneath a little bit of drier air aloft, leading to this unstable environment already. Very limited capping in place at this point. In fact, mixed layer convective inhibition is reading at 0 here, so we are pretty much uncapped at this point, and that's why we're already starting to see renewed development back out to the west across northwest Texas into central Oklahoma, because we just don't have that much of a capping inversion in place to prevent storm initiation right now. But usually that would be a bad thing if, from a severe weather perspective, a negative for severe weather. You already have storms going this early in the morning, but because we already have a favorable environment, they're going to take advantage of that environment, and we should have multiple rounds of convection as we go into the afternoon hours today. Wind profiles remain favorable. Again, that stronger low-level jet still in place. About 40 knots of one flow at 1 kilometer there. Strong, largely looping hodographs in the low levels with about 40 knots of effective bulk shear. Again, that low-level jet is expected to wane a little bit through the day, but we should maintain enough low-level shear to promote an all-hazards threat with any supercells and any more intense convection today. And this is going to be the environment that's going to be fairly indicative of what we might see going into the afternoon hours today. All right, some forecast data. This is the 12Z NAM from this morning, and you can see at 500 millibars, here is our big old trough. Again, most of the flow relegated to the backside of this trough, so it is still in the process of maturing. We'll slowly move off to the east today, as you see from the progression here. We start to get a little bit of eastward progress of this trough, and by this evening, broad belt of stronger southwesterly flow aloft, 50 to 60 plus knots of flow there across Texas into Oklahoma. So that should promote strong deep layer shear to organize the convection today. But the axis of the trough still lagging back here a little bit. So we're kind of a little bit farther out ahead of the trough. We're going to have to rely on those surface features, but it's not going to take much. In this kind of environment where we don't have any capping, we don't need all that much forcing at all to initiate storms. As you can see on the radar, we're already getting storms to go when we have, when our trough is still lagging back here, and we just have basically broad southwesterly flow across the region. All it will take is a boundary or a little bit of a subtle shortwave. That's all we need to initiate storms in this uncapped environment. So forcing is certainly going to be there. It certainly will be a little bit more subtle, but we will have multiple rounds of convection and a lot of storms firing, even though perhaps we don't necessarily have a robust initiating boundary per se. It's mostly just kind of across the open warm sector. We will have a lot of storms firing because we have just so little capping to hold storms back. We're going to see a lot of updraft fire, and that is going to make the storm mode a little bit on the messy side today. But again, we uncapped warm sector, so we have plenty of real estate to support severe storms and perhaps multiple bands out ahead of the main band out here back to the west. I'll go down to the surface here real quick to see how our surface low progresses through the day. If you keep your eyes focused there on southeast Colorado, nice little surface low developing there throughout the day, helping to kind of back those surface winds and strengthen those surface winds over the southern plains. As far as our moisture goes, I will zoom in here to our Southern Plains sector. And so again, robust moisture here, continuing to make its way off to the north with that surface low development going on into this afternoon. We'll see pretty robust recovery here in the next few hours because we have strong low-level flow to transport that moisture northward. And you see a lot of convection. The NAM is progging a lot of convection out in this corridor, helping to really eat into those dew points there. So this is a lot of convection. But you see, the overall warm sector is very, very broad. So we'll have activity out here along the dry line. So that actually is kind of our initiating boundary here, perhaps, to focus storm development. But we also will have plenty of opportunity for storms to fire out here well ahead of the main bands in the open warm sector. So we could have multiple bands all along very subtle confluence zones of where more discrete supercell activity may fire. A couple areas we're watching out here right ahead of on the leading edge of the ongoing convection this afternoon, and out here well ahead, eastern Oklahoma southward into East Texas, western Louisiana, western Arkansas, could be a focus for some prefrontal and convection well out ahead of the main complex here. So I'm going to take a sounding here. 18Z will take a sounding in the southern Oklahoma corridor, and then one out here across kind of just east of the DFW Metroplex to get a little bit of a sample here of our environment across the region. Here we are, southern Oklahoma. Plenty of instability here, 1,400 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE, a little bit on the skinny side, but we should have plenty of instability to support a robust severe threat. And that low-level jet remains a little bit strong here on the NAM model. Looks to be about 40 knots or so here. This is at 18Z, so noon Central Standard Time. So plenty of low-level shear remains there, over 200 meters squared per second, where effective storm relative helicity will be favorable for an all-hazards threat with any storms that can take advantage of that. Down into Texas, instability there as well. A little bit weaker low-level instability, and that may be a drawback to really robust convection down in that corridor well ahead of the ongoing convective bands. But we do have a favorable wind profile, strong deep layer shear, and adequate low-level shear for an all-hazards threat with any supercells that can sustain. Again, it is conditional whether or not storms will sustain themselves out here well out ahead toward the Arklatex region, but if any storm can sustain and become supercellular, it will pose a risk for all hazards in this kind of an environment. So we'll move on a little bit here later on in the afternoon. Again, lots of convection here across central Oklahoma and North Texas, eating away at the environment there, but we still have plenty of real estate out ahead to support convective development. And then we'll take one down here in East Texas as well. So this is going to be at 21Z or 0Z, so 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and our environment maintains its favorability for all severe hazards. We see an increase in deep layer shear to over 60 knots at this point, thanks to the strengthening of the 500 millibar flow. Hodographs very, very lengthy by this point. With strong low-level shear. So whether or not we have a QLCS or more discrete supercells, any storm in this environment, any storm or storm complex in this environment will have the opportunity to produce all hazards, including damaging winds and tornadoes, perhaps some significant, especially along the outflow boundary where it can persist from the morning convection. So any storm that can track along the outflow boundary will have that greatest threat for tornadic activity. Here down in East Texas, much of the same. Again, a little bit weaker low-level instability and weaker low-level lapse rates there. Perhaps a drawback, once again, to more robust convective activity out there. But you can see strong deep layer shear and strong low-level shear to support that all hazards risk with any supercells that can sustain themselves. All right, let's take a look at some convection allowing data, model data for today. This is the 12Z HRRR run. It has all this convection out here across this region, progged pretty well. Weakens as it goes off to the east. Actually, that is maintaining pretty strongly across this region, which we are seeing that may be a little bit of an overdue as far as the intensity of this complex. It is a little bit on the weaker side at this point. So the HRRR may be a little bit overdoing this convective complex here. Not going to be too much of an issue as far as what it will prog as far as our comparing with our own forecast here, but just something to note. Has all this convection back behind, this convection in central Texas as well. So pretty good progs here this morning, initialization from the HRRR. And you can see just a lot of storms firing out here across this corridor. a bunch of updrafts in an uncapped environment, but you see multiple areas where storms are possible. Back here along the actual dry line, out ahead, this complex moves off to the east, and then this warm advection regime well out ahead of the kind of that middle band there. We have multiple little beans, quote unquote, there across the eastern Texas into Arkansas corridor that could pose that all hazards risk if they can sustain. Again, that's a big if, but if supercells can sustain in that corridor, they will pose a risk for all hazards. Then we go into the evening, we see lots more storm development there. Perhaps storm intensity ramps up a little bit closer to the Red River there. Places like Durant over to Hugo, Ida Bell, Oklahoma, with low-level shear increasing. Didn't really show that here when we went over our NAM data, but low-level shear, our low-level jet, will sustain through much of the day and then increase once again going into the evening and overnight hours tonight. 50 to 60 plus knots, just like it did last night. So the tornado threat may actually ramp up as we go after dark, after sunset this evening, with that strengthening low-level shear, even if storms are a little bit on the messy side. And any more discrete supercells that can tap into the stronger low-level shear will have a threat for tornadoes, and perhaps some strong. Don't want to rule out a strong tornado, very similar to how last night played out. This is at 6Z, so midnight Central Standard Time here, southeast Oklahoma, ahead of the complex, and you can see those photographs are very, very large there out as we go even deep into the night. So any more discrete supercells will pose a risk for tornadoes, perhaps some strong, as well as some spin-ups within the ongoing convective complex, even if it is more of a linearly organized system. That continues into the overnight hours tonight on the HER. Lots of convection, and again, multiple rounds of convection going into the overnight hours tonight. We'll get into Monday here in just a second. ARW model here. So this is how it's progged. Moves off that complex pretty quickly. Some stuff down in Texas, pretty quick development down there across that region, and then congeals into more of a squall line. Does have that kind of out well out ahead, that band of more discrete supercells out in the Arklatex region, so that will have to be watched as well. And then we see some that robust squall line move off to the east into the overnight hours tonight. NSSL WRF model, much of the same. A lot more widespread convection here across this corridor at this time. This is about when I'm recording this right now, 16Z, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. A lot more convection than there actually is. And this kind of complex here a little bit stronger than what it is actually ongoing right now. So this NSSL WRF model may not be all that accurate. Would tend to believe more the ARW and HER models, but it does have kind of the same idea. Kind of this complex here from Oklahoma down into Texas with more discrete activity possible out ahead of that complex going into the evening hours today. So let's go into Monday now real quick here. I'll zoom back out. We, again, need to figure out how the convection today is going to progress into tomorrow before we can get a clearer picture on how things will progress tomorrow. But overall, the setup is, as we discussed yesterday, that trough will finally eject into the plains, become a little bit more mature, take on a much more compact nature. That flow, as you see, will move mostly from the back side of the trough axis to the front side of the trough axis, meaning that now it's a mature trough and kind of on it's on a downtrend from this, kind of at its peak, and will be downtrending going forward, going into Tuesday. You see it flattens out pretty significantly there. But for Monday, very robust, strong flow in the exit region of this trough, so we will have a lot of forcing tomorrow. It will be focused very much on that Oklahoma-Texas corridor there, perhaps up into Kansas as well. So very strong flow aloft there. It is more of a meridionally oriented flow there, so we should have our surface boundary oriented kind of in the same direction as we talked about yesterday, and that will lead to more of a linearly organized complex here. Surface low moves off to the east, strengthens a little bit across Oklahoma as we go into the day. You see a very nice very nice compact surface low there, with strong backed flow in the warm sector out ahead of that surface low. I'll zoom into our southern plains sector here. Dew points are going to remain on the high side. We should see very robust recovery here given the strengthening of the surface low through the day on Monday. You see those 60s and 70s dew points widespread out ahead of this dry line / cold front / Pacific front, whatever you want to call it there. Perhaps a warm frontal zone up in here, and plenty of real estate to provide another day of multiple rounds of severe convection there. But you see our initiating boundary like that, our flow aloft very much parallel to that initiating boundary, and I'll show you our shear vectors with respect to the initiating boundary. See they're very much parallel to that initiating boundary. Although this is a little bit of a change from yesterday. We saw much more shear vector orientation that was much more parallel to the initiating boundary. That is not the case with this particular NAM run. We do see a little bit more perpendicularity with these shear vectors with respect to the initiating boundary. So that is something to watch for sure. If that is the case, we should have strong low-level kinematics in place. I'll go to with our nicely backed low-level flow out ahead of the surface low. I'll show you once again there. Surface low strengthens and backs that low-level flow, especially across eastern Oklahoma into the Arklatex. And then we see our 850 millibar flow should remain fairly strong throughout the day tomorrow. You see 40 to 50 knots there. By 0Z, about 50 plus knots or so out across eastern Oklahoma ahead of that initiating boundary. So that is going to foster very strong low-level shear. And so if a more discrete storm mode can be realized, this is going to be a day where we have all hazards, perhaps significant hazards in play, and especially the tornado risk here. Let's take a couple soundings here. 21Z out ahead of this, the Dryline Pacific front here. So this is kind of central to east central Oklahoma, and that's a very favorable profile for all hazards there, especially tornadoes and damaging winds. Enough instability. Again, I don't love to see this kind of saturated, more skinny cape profile, but 1,500 plus joules per kilogram mixed layer cape. 72 over 69 at the surface with strong low-level shear. Somewhat unidirectional low-level flow here, so not a ton of turning in the lowest kilometer of the atmosphere, but plenty of speed shear, increasing from 15 knots at the surface to over 50 knots there at 850 millibars. So strong speed shear in the lowest levels of the atmosphere is still favorable for tornadic supercells and tornadic convection there. Same thing in North Texas there, plenty of instability with not a ton of turning in the low levels, but still plenty of speed shear and plenty of turning overall in the lowest few kilometers, favorable for supercells there. And then by 0Z, once that low-level jet really ramps up into eastern Oklahoma, and then going into the overnight hours, Monday into Tuesday morning. So this is eastern Oklahoma, and that is just a classic significant tornado type sounding there. We do have a little bit of convective contamination, but not a ton. So this is probably still a decent representation of what the environment might look like, but plenty of instability, a little bit fatter profiles here of instability by tomorrow evening, 1,800 joules per kilogram mixed layer cape. Again, this is in eastern Oklahoma, and just large looping photographs, significant SRH, effective storm relative helicity in excess of 400 meters squared per second squared there. So that would certainly favor significant tornadoes, especially with any more discrete convection if it can be maintained, which again is in question. But these latest model runs here are suggesting perhaps a little bit better chance for discrete activity with shear vectors a little bit more perpendicular, especially in Oklahoma, to that initiating boundary. Down in Texas, we do see a little bit of a transition to more of a boundary parallel shear vector there, so more of a squall line there. I still think with such strong forcing and still a decent component that is parallel to the initiating boundary, we'll probably still see a pretty quick transition to upscale growth, but once again, we do have quite a wide warm sector to provide for opportunities for prefrontal confluence bands, perhaps out here across eastern Oklahoma, Arklatex into western Louisiana, western Arkansas. So that'll be something to watch as well. And then the front moves through, and that severe weather threat is going to end from west to east out across the southern plains. Thankfully here, as looks to be a pretty rough stretch, starting off with a bang last night. So let's take a look at some cam data here for tomorrow. Our cams are out for tomorrow. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We'll take a look at the 12Z HRRR for tomorrow. So this is our convection today. Again, a lot of convection persisting. We see additional development there overnight across Oklahoma with an uncapped atmosphere and strong parameters in place. That is not all that surprising. So another kind of MCS, a band of storms moves through overnight. And then we see, so this kind of persists into the day tomorrow. So again, we're going to have to wait and see how things play out overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. But the HRRR has kind of this activity persisting in sort of a clustered mode, kind of a broken band of storms there. Some discrete elements in here. You can see the little beans, individual beans there in these bands. Our main band back out here, some confluence bands out ahead in the open warm sector. So any more discrete supercell, again, will be able to take advantage of this environment favorable for all hazards, including significant tornadoes there. And then we see more of a line develop as we go into the nighttime hours Monday into Tuesday, early Tuesday morning. WRF ARW model here. Going into tonight, we see additional convective development very early on. This is at 11Z, so that's going to be 5 a.m. Perhaps some low-end severe potential out there with those storms very early on in the morning on Monday. And then we see it persist into the afternoon. Kind of a broken band here as progged by the ARW. You can see little convective elements in their little supercells in kind of a broken band there by early tomorrow afternoon. Moving off to the east, and then we see a little bit more of congealing of those storms into a squall line out as it moves into eastern Oklahoma and the Arklatex, with some potential for prefrontal supercells out there as well. NSSL WRF model. Much of the same here as we go into the evening today. Additional development out here. So we're going to have to watch here, northwest Texas into southwest Oklahoma tomorrow morning. Again, 4, 5, 6, 7 a.m. Perhaps some supercell development very early on out there across southwest Oklahoma. And then that'll congeal into kind of the round into the afternoon. Once again, a more broken band of storms along the dryline/Pacific front there. So supercells will have the possibility of producing all hazards, including significant tornadoes. And then we move, storms may again intensify as the low-level jet really ramps up towards sunset and after sunset tomorrow as the storms move into eastern Oklahoma and the Arklatex there. But we will see more of a congealing into more of a line there by tomorrow evening into early morning Tuesday. So that's what we've got going on right now. A couple more days and we'll be through this severe weather event. The next SPC outlook is going to be probably out by the time you see this video. If not, it will be out shortly after. But for now, we have a slight risk level 2 out of 5 across parts of Oklahoma and Texas. That could change. That could be upgraded to an enhanced risk if they see fit here with this next outlook. But for now, it's a slight risk. And we are expecting multiple rounds of convection later on today with the potential for supercells producing all hazards, especially going into the evening hours tonight when that low-level jet really ramps up. So slight risk there. Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Lawton, Wichita Falls, Abilene, and areas in between. WinStar Casino, Thackerville, Denton, Texas. Cuts off just before the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but DFW should be on alert for some severe storms today. With that marginal threat extending up into Kansas and Nebraska and then down into the Texas-Louisiana border region. All hazards once again on the table for today. 5% tornado risk at this point. Again, that could be upgraded in future outlooks, but for now just a 5% with a 2% extending out outside of that as well. Large to very large hail possible with those initial supercells out to the west here in that yellow stippled region, and then damaging wind possible for those storms as well. Then tomorrow, enhanced risk is out, level 3 out of 5, covering the threat of perhaps significant tornadoes there, especially in the orange shaded region. So that is going to include places like Joplin, Fort Smith, that I-40 corridor to the east of the Oklahoma City metro area down into the Arklatex, Paris, Texas, under the gun there for that enhanced risk with the slight risks surrounding that. 10% hatched as those storms move into eastern Oklahoma late tomorrow afternoon into evening. They will encounter that much stronger low-level jet, and so we should see a threat for significant tornadoes there, especially in the yellow stippled region for tomorrow, and then damaging wind going to be a threat as well, and maybe some large hail early on in the convective life cycle. So yesterday was a rough one for folks in Oklahoma. Hopefully we don't see a repeat of that, but the models are showing a pretty volatile environment across the region, especially Texas and Oklahoma, for all hazards today and tomorrow. So once again, keep those weather radios handy. Have multiple sources of receiving weather information, and keep your eyes on the SPC for the latest up-to-date information as we go into the next couple of days. As far as the convective outlooks go and the associated watches and warnings. So stay safe out there. Have your severe weather plan in place in case a warning is issued for your area, and we'll get through this event just fine. So with that, thanks for watching. Be safe out there, and we'll see you in the next video.